Hello there and welcome to Wrong Way's Columbia Cast with me, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. Now, alongside the hospitality industry, which we discussed a couple of weeks back, the aviation sector across the globe has also practically ground to a halt due to the coronavirus crisis. Like many things, how commercial airlines will emerge from all of this is difficult to know at this remove. Joining us to talk more about this is a man whose whole working life has revolved around aviation. Declan Ryan, a founder member of the eponymous Ryanair in Europe and now executive chairman at the Colombian-based Viva Air. Welcome to Wrong Way's Columbia Cast.
Thank you, Brendan.
Well, I was going to say welcome back, Declan, as we did have a podcast chat last year, but that was for the brother podcast, the Columbia Cast with Semana Magazine. So technically a different production. But for more of a background about Declan and the application of the low-cost carrier model here in South America, I do encourage you to check out that the link to that podcast is in the text accompanying this podcast. But to start off with, Declan, what is the situation with Viva Air, and do you have any idea when you'll be able to return to the skies? Any insider information at this remove?
Never any insider information, Brendan, but our understanding is that it will be the end of May. And I think that will be a pretty hard date, and I can see us back flying. So at the moment, 16 of our airplanes in Colombia are grounded and 4 of our Peruvian-based aircraft are grounded.
So you've no flights whatsoever, is that right in saying? Or do you have maybe...
Yeah. Thanks for raising that point. Yeah, we do. We have loads of, a lot of, humanitarian flights. For example, we did a flight yesterday for, food cargo, bringing food up to, Rio Hacha. And that was out of Cali. And that was partly done with the local authorities and, our foundation in the airline, Viva Air Foundation. And we're also doing a lot of repatriation flights for Colombians who are stuck in, Colombians and Peruvians who are stuck either in the US or other parts of the region.
Okay, yeah. So just the greater Americas region, and so where you tend to fly.
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of staff, I'm right in saying you employ around 1,000 people. Is that correct?
That's right.
In normal time. So what capacity are you operating at now, and for the employees not currently needed, how have you dealt with those?
Yeah, it's obviously a very difficult time for everybody in Viva Air, and our staff are fantastic. A lot of people have taken unpaid leave unrequested. So it's really a skeleton staff. It's to operate the flights, and obviously we're doing quite a lot of work on aircraft hygiene and cleaning and maintenance. So I don't know the exact numbers, Brendan, but it'd be like maybe 10% of that.
Okay, so yeah, pretty a fair amount have left at this moment in time. I mean, obviously it's very difficult to say at this remove, but would you see yourselves getting back to pretty much full operation that you had pre-coronavirus, or before coronavirus, as people are now putting it, BC? Yeah. Do you think you'll get back to the same levels of operation in terms of staff?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's going to be an issue. It'll just be a question of phasing. And one of the great benefits of Viva is we, approximately 95% of our flights are domestic. So, domestic flying around the world is going to, recover a lot quicker than international flights.
You're pretty confident of that, yeah?
You know what? We live in a world where it's hard to be confident about anything, Brendan, but I think the Colombian government have done a pretty good job on the whole management of the crisis. And I think people will feel okay, with all the new biosafety and security measures like wearing masks and so on. I think people will be okay hopping on a flight up to the coastline, or hopping to Cali or Bogota or wherever.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, the kind of biosecurity measures that might be needed, and some of the things that have been mooted as well. It just a little in a little while. Obviously, Viva Air is a low cost carrier, and in our first interview that we had last year, that I mentioned in the introduction, We talked about how Viva Air has allowed a lot of Colombians who normally wouldn't have flown back in the day, because obviously the cost of your tickets is far cheaper. Indeed, they rival the cost of bus tickets here. But are we going to see this model now disrupted and perhaps in jeopardy? Because will people return to flights? I know you said it's hard to be confident, but it's very difficult to say at this stage. And people are saying now that flying might actually return to be this kind of a luxury service.
No, I don't think the low-cost model is in jeopardy. I think it will be disrupted. I think what we have to do is look at what's happening around the world, and globally, if you take somewhere like the US, where there is, in relative levels, quite a lot of domestic flying. So the US is starting to gradually take off domestically, and also, part of that is the point you make about the new measures and the biosafety and so on.
Yeah, so one of those things that we've heard, and I know Michael O'Leary, the outspoken CEO of Ryanair, of course, very much part of your background.
Yeah.
He's against this idea of taking out the middle seat. That's one thing that's been mooted about this, and that's something I believe you're not a fan of at all.
No, I'm
as
not.
Well.
I'm not. And by the way, can I just move my airline hat to the side for a moment? On a pure biosafety level, the area between, seat A and seat C, so let's say the middle seat being B, it's very small. I don't know the exact measurement, but it's probably 3 feet max. So it's less than 2 meters, less than 1 meter. So, to say that that's going to save health of people on board a flight is a bit of a nonsense. And I think Michael's right. And I'm not just saying this because I'm still a shareholder in Ryanair. I think he's right on the basis that, what really is important is people being tested properly at the airport or prior to the airport. I know that a couple of US carriers are asking people to declare when they're booking if they've had the virus. So that actually makes people feel a lot better about it. I could see a situation where we would ask a passenger again once they got to the airport, just to acknowledge that. And, we're going to have the cleanest airplanes in Colombia. And we're also looking at giving out hand wipes when people get on board. So like everything in life, Brendan, there's not one silver bullet. There's piles of different implementations that we'll do. And by the way, we're in full discussion with Aerocivil and the DGAC on this, who are the guys who and the people who run Aerocivil in Colombia don't get enough recognition. They're very serious professionals.
So you're talking with them about these measures that you'll bring in, because obviously this will have to go across the board for all airlines.
Well, it's a lot harder, Brendan, for Avianca. And LAN, who have a huge international network. So what they're saying in the States, and I agree with it, is, and I mentioned it earlier, recovery will come back quicker for domestic flights, but for international flights, it's going to take a lot longer. And, people hopping on a long haul flight out of Bogota to Madrid or London or wherever. That's going to be quite a while away, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the other element to that as well, that perhaps if you're going on an international flight and it's non-essential, if it's just for tourism or whatever, and you have to do a 2-week quarantine, I don't think too many people are going to be keen to be travelling if they stay.
Can we be also a bit honest about this whole thing? We'll be worried that there'll be somebody from New York behind us, or somebody from Italy, or somebody from China. And that's not a nationalistic issue. That's just, those have been the hot spots around the world.
Yeah, it's a fair point indeed. Yeah, people want to stay local, I guess, and know the areas that have been relatively low in terms of coronavirus, COVID-19.
Yeah, we're seeing it here in Ireland, Brendan, and I'm talking to you, as you know, from Dublin. Like the view here in Ireland's also done a very good job on managing the virus. Domestic tourism is going to be the first area that will recover, and that will be a good thing for Colombia.
But do you think, in terms of whatever measures that you'll have to bring in, when we do go back to our new normal, the prices of your tickets surely are going to have to rise a little bit.
Yeah, they probably will, particularly if we're mandated to have the middle seat empty. That's taking, if you take a hotel of 100 bedrooms, that's taking 30 bedrooms out. So the price of the hotel as well as airline seats will probably go up. But, that's not our model, as you know, and we want Colombians and everybody else who's in Colombia to get the best price possible.
Would then you be worried if that does happen that you won't be able to offer the cheap flights that you had heretofore? And again, will people want to fly if it's 3 times more expensive or 4 times, whatever the figure might be, than taking a bus?
Yeah, I think you're being a bit extreme because I much prefer to be in an airplane than a bus. And I'm not being funny there because, not just hygiene, but the duration of a bus will be very long. Time. And listen, Viva's in a pretty good position. We've locked down our costs. We have a very supportive staff. We don't have any of the troubles that Avianca have. I'm not being smart when I say that. I'm just saying our competitors are in a lot worse position than we are. And we're going to be one of the winners.
In terms of keeping those costs down, what exactly are you doing practically? Obviously, you talked about staff taking voluntary leave and things like that. Well, what other measures have you taken?
We have a really good partnership with our suppliers, particularly the aircraft leasing community, which a lot of them, as you know, are based in Ireland anyway. So we've been having discussions with them about deferral of payments and so on. But the whole industry is doing that, so it's not unique to Viva. I'm not too sure what Avianca are doing with their aircraft suppliers, but we are actively talking to them on a daily basis about what we see happening here and in Colombia, and and that includes the fuel suppliers and the airports and so on. Listen, everybody's in this together, so there is a lot of good partnership and cooperation going, and some of our aircraft leasing companies, including the likes of GCAS and Calc and so on. I don't want to go too much into the industry conversation. Yeah. And Airbus, they've been very supportive.
Okay, yeah. Well, as you said, everybody is in it together, and it's in everybody's interest that this, if you excuse the pun, takes off again. Yeah. Hopefully, from a Colombian perspective, the end of May or whatever, beginning of June, where flights can resume. But you mentioned Avianca there in passing as well. Your own take on it? Obviously, they've kind of gone practically cap in hand to the Colombian government here, looking for a bailout. There's a lot of emotional attachment, obviously, with Avianca in Colombia. One of the oldest airlines in the world, celebrated its 100th anniversary last December. Do you see them getting that bailout?
First of all, I have to say I'm talking from Dublin, so therefore I would have to refer to our CEO, Felix, a bit more on this. But my gut feeling is Avianca's being a bit coy on the whole thing, and what they've stated is they haven't told anybody bar the government actually how much money they need. We hear it's a very large figure, but that's only rumor. They've said publicly that the industry in Colombia needs $1.2 billion. We don't know where that figure came from. We're talking to the government for a lot less. Like we would be talking to the government in small percentile of that kind of support. And we're not looking for a bailout. We're just looking for a short-term loan. Like we'll repay it. But there's all kinds of conversations going on down there. Nationalization, which I don't think the Colombian government should do. It's a company owned by a U.S. airline. I don't know why they would be investing in it. Forget all the kind of TLC and the warm and fuzzy stuff about Avianca being 100 years old. That doesn't mean it should get a bailout and so on. And by the way, I don't know if that's the priority of Colombia. Colombia's priority, and President Duque has said this, Brendan, several times, is to the hospitals, is to the ventilators, to the real stuff.
Yeah, of course. And it seems to be splitting opinion here. But it is the national carrier in a sense.
But why is it, Brendan? Like, national carrier means it's owned by the government. It's not.
As in the national airline, in a similar sense that Aer Lingus is kind of seen as Irish, Avianca is seen as Colombian in that sense. So I think you can understand the sentimentality in that sense.
Totally. But sentimentality and business doesn't go together, Brendan.
And you're damn right about that. That's perhaps why I'm not very good at the business side of things, indeed. But I mean, it will exist in some way, shape or form, but maybe under a different owner or whatever. I know both of us have read this article where somebody was analysing that perhaps Copa could step into the breach and take over. So it's not going to disappear, but it just might change hands, I guess.
Yeah, you used the language, young man, disappear. I didn't. I think, to be serious about it, Brendan, I think they will survive in some shape or form, but they will not have 152 airplanes and 20,000 staff. It will be a lot smaller Avianca. They have 6 billion in debt. I just can't see how they can not restructure that debt, which badly needs to happen. I'd be very surprised if Copa did something there, being a little bit facetious, but there is no domestic market in Panama, so Copa have their own issues to sort out.
And of course, look at it, people might think we're having a go at Avianca. Like, obviously, KLM, have similar issues.
I hope I don't come across that. I have great respect for Anco. I think the timing has been just terrible for them.
Yeah, of course, with all the issues that they had in the last 12 to 24 months. That's true. But again, in our first interview that we had last year, like, you did say that you didn't really see Avianca as competition because their model is very different. Now, of course, they did change a few things in the last few months, bringing in their branded fares, which could be seen as kind of a direct reaction to the arrival of Viva Air and the market that you've been taking. But is this a case then that Avianca's difficulty is Viva's opportunity, domestically speaking, anyway? Can you see mopping up a few routes, or at least adding to your own
We've
share?
been asked on a theoretical basis what other services we could do. And, there's a lot of services we could do internationally. As I said to you earlier, we only have one international route to Miami out of Colombia, Lima as well. But we could do a bucket load of the international routes, within a 4-hour flying. And, if the market prevails that there's no flights to San Jose or Texas or, Argentina, we'll look at that for sure.
So certainly there might be bigger opportunities for Viva Air in the next few months.
Well, the market view is, and it's not just my own, and by the way, this isn't just for Avianca, it's for other airlines that are in trouble around the world. Azul over in Brazil and Norwegian, and there's been carriers all over the place who have been in trouble. The market will backfill if a carrier, the market takes care of what happens after somebody leaves it, and that's not just the airline business. So, but I want to show respect, and I realize that there's a bit of the shamrock factor related to Aer Lingus and Avianca.
Yeah, for sure, exactly, and it is a big employer here as well. I think up to 17,000 people I read as well. So
I make a joke about Avianca that it's a love-hate relationship. They love the brand but hate the fares.
I guess we'll have to take a survey on that one. Yeah, I mean, look at that.
Or you might have to edit that part, brother.
There's no editing now. That's gone in.
Don't show it to the lawyers then.
Well, okay then, Declan, we won't. But no, I mean, look at it. As I said, at the risk of people thinking that we're kicking somebody when we're down, in a sense.
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm certainly not.
Yeah, and there are a lot of airlines in trouble as well. So there's going to be a lot of consolidation, I imagine, in the next few months and years. And we still really don't know how long this is going to run. And you'd have to agree with that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked as well then on a broader scale. in the last interview about the issues that were affecting the aviation industry. And it's fair to say that there hasn't been much sympathy for airlines anyway leading up to this, because it's kind of seen as a big contributor to carbon emissions and things like that. So all this for the industry right now, it's a challenging time, and this just adds to it for all airlines. And I know you said in an interview last week on Irish radio that you don't see Viva Air maybe being the leader in this sense because you're relatively small compared to the bigger players. But it's just giving more attention because people are thinking, well, look at the planet now, carbon emissions are down, all that kind of stuff, all these flights that we don't need, and people are discovering ways to survive without actually going to meetings and things like that in person. So the sector is probably going to take a big hit all around.
I think it's going to be a different business, that's for sure. But I think the survivors, including Viva Air, will be in a good position over time. As you know, I'm no eco warrior and I can barely spell emissions. But what I do see, Brendan, is state aid like the bailout to Lufthansa and Air France, and possibly Avianca, if it happens, may dictate, something they do with regard to their carbon footprint or, I think in France, as an example, they're saying that where there's I think it's like a 3-hour radius, that the Air France pull off the route and that the preference is to use the trains. But emissions and Greta and the greenhouse and all this kind of stuff is so far down the agenda of airlines at the moment. It's about survival.
Yeah, and people are talking about a big change coming. I mean, maybe that's wishful thinking in some ways for some people. I don't know how much of a change. Like, I think maybe when flights do resume, there might be a big demand, perhaps in the next few months, that people just want to visit other places. But as you talked and we mentioned this, the domestic flights are going to be the key, and that's really where you're going to be focusing on, I'm guessing, because international flying, I can't see it taking off for at least another 6 months at least.
No, you're right, Brendan. International flying is an issue and it hasn't been tested yet. And what's been tested, the biggest aviation market in the world is the US. And what has been tested is domestic, and very little has been tested with regard to international. One of the theories that's going around at the moment from the big boys is to have these kind of clean corridors for very big international routes. So let's say you take New York, London, or New York, Hong Kong, that everything will have the same quality as standard. Let's say it's whatever, IATA standard 3000 or whatever they call it. So, taxi drivers, cabin crew, pilots, you name it, airports, airlines, everybody, when you think about your flight, so everybody that you interact with or touch or partake in an airplane going from New York to London effectively will be of the same standard for biosafety. But by the way, you won't be flying from New York to somewhere like Birmingham or Dusseldorf because those standards won't be around the world.
Okay,
it's one of the theories that's running around at the moment. And by the way, it makes a lot of sense. It's probably the top 50 routes in the world, the most important.
Yeah, and then everything else, I guess it's a case-by-case basis then, whether they can survive or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting, I guess, the whole sector. And I mentioned in the introduction, aviation is probably going to be the one that will suffer as much as any other sector. But business flights and things like that, you're pretty confident, though, as confident as one can be at this remove, that here in Colombia, come hopefully, we're saying June at least, that people will go back taking those flights.
I think they will, Brendan. Also, you have to remember that the decision by the Colombian government, as well as other governments, to close down the airspace is a very difficult one, because it's not just, people sometimes see airplanes as people just, going on a vacation or a holiday or whatever. But, how do you get a doctor at the moment from Cartagena to Bogota? It must be impossible. And as we know, Colombia is twice the size of France. So Colombia needs airlines and needs air network, not just for visiting friends and relatives, but for business, for SMEs, for hospitals, for moving medical people around. So I am confident. I wouldn't be putting any exact time frame on it.
Yeah, well, I think really that it's going to be, as you said, SMEs and business people, medical staff, things like that. That's going to be the essential travel.
If I had to bet on it, I would say it depends on, and I think this is the crux of it all, Brendan. It depends on human nature. And if you're down in Bogota and you meet one of your pals and they've just come back and they say to you verbally that the flight from Cartagena was fine and everybody wore a mask, and I think the human factor is the critical factor. What will make people feel secure just to do an hour's flight.
And of course, well, there are a lot of things as well outside of our control in terms of how city authorities. I know Cartagena, the mayor has talked about any visitors to that city will have to be in quarantine from even coming from within Colombia.
Really?
So
wow.
I think so. Yeah, I heard that in passing. So again, it's all going to depend, I guess, on local decisions taken. But we'll see what happens. Just personally, then, Declan, you're in Dublin. If you want to get back to Colombia now, it's going to be pretty difficult, is it?
Probably. I'll see what happens at the end of May. As you know, my kids are here in Dublin and I wanted to see them and make sure they're okay and stuff, even though they're young adults. And it's also my home.
Yeah.
And I was a bit disappointed that we thought there was Viva thought, and we said it to the government, there was need for essential air services. We didn't think it should be like 100% flying, but we thought some of the cities should have been. But you know what? We're not judging those decisions. We're just getting on with them. And so, yeah, I don't know when I'll be back, but hopefully soon.
Just on those, when they are the essential humanitarian flights, how does that work? People
it's a bit ironic. And I said this recently in the other interview, because there's no problem with the middle seat because everybody's trying to get home. No, I'm just being dead serious. And everybody wears a mask, and... those humanitarian flights are going well, and but they're one or two a day, Brendan. It's nothing. It's not. It'd be a small percentage of flying.
But my point was, how does that work? Did the government come to you and ask you, or how exactly does?
Yeah, it depends. Like seemingly, there's a lot of the Peruvian government came to us. Viva Peru about there was a lot of Peruvian kind of students kind of stuck in the US, particularly in Florida, and they wanted to get them home. I guess a lot of those kids were teenager up to early 20s, and the parents just wanted to come back to Peru. So we enter into a contract with it and so on.
Just one final thing that came into my head as well, in terms of obviously the price of oil now is at record lows, going into a negative price. So that might offset any other measures that come in when flights do resume. That that cost will be less.
Yeah. You're right, Brendan. That certainly will help. But for example, we have at least 2 months of revenue to catch up on, and let's say it takes 6 months to a year for domestic flying to get back to normal. So, we're not operating, going back to our hotel idea of 100 rooms, we won't be operating at full occupancy for a while.
Well, that's the challenge for the industry and so many other industries as well at this time, and just an awful lot of uncertainty. Declan Ryan, Executive Chairman of Viva Air, thank you very much for taking the time. And when you do come back to Colombia, safe flight, however you do manage to come back. Which airline do you take, by the way, when you come back to Colombia?
I used to use Iberia a lot, and of course Avianca, out of Madrid and stuff. So hopefully they'll be flying.
Okay, well, hopefully indeed. You can send us on your ticket when you get it and tell us who you went with. Declan Ryan, thanks a million for that. That is our lot for this episode of Wrong Ways Colombia Cast. If you want to make contact with me, you can via Twitter. The handle is @WWayCorrigan, or my Facebook page is Wrong Way Corrigan blog. Until the next time, ciao ciao.